Hi everyone, I'm creating this video for anyone with a C6 Corvette who has an issue with their fuel filler door where it will not stay shut. This fuel filler door has a latch mechanism that has a pin. There's a spring that pushes this pin out, and when that spring pushes it out, the door catches that so it won't open. When you're pressing the button inside your car to open the fuel filler door, that causes the spring to compress down and it pulls it in. Then since it's not sticking out, that allows that door to open. Eventually what happens though is that spring ends up rusting. So rather than sticking out this far, when you let go of the button, it only sticks out just a little bit. It might be just enough to catch the door, to close it temporarily, and then you go over a bump and it opens. Or it might be retracted just so far back that it doesn't even catch the door at all. So we're going to go ahead and fix that today on this 2006 C6 Corvette. The cool thing about this repair is you can either do two things. One is you can go out and find a whole new cable and replace that. That's going to cost you perhaps $120 for the parts. If you took it to a dealer or to a repair shop to put that in, I'm not really sure what that would cost. Maybe it would be double the price of the part, or maybe even triple. So maybe you're like leaving there for $300-400 to have them fix it for you. If you can do it yourself, if you have a set of metric wrenches, all you need to do is find a spring. You might be able to find a spring in your soap dispenser that you could repurpose for this, or you might have a spring in a fuse holder, like an old DC automotive fuse holder. Or you can just go down to your local hardware store and just search for a spring to put into this part. So it's a pretty easy fix. It will probably take you under 2 hours if you have the tools. If you're really good at this kind of thing, probably a half hour to an hour at most. So I shut my gas door and bump the car, it opens. That's happening when I'm driving down the road. So here again I tap it, simulating a road impact, and it pops open. So here I'm pressing the switch to open the gas door. And there's the pin that gets sucked in when you press the button. When you release it, it's supposed to stick out farther, as shown in this image, then there would not be an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and take my floor jack and jack up the car. I'm going to take my air wrench and remove the 5 lug nuts. This is a 19mm impact socket. Just to be safe, I'm going to put a jack stand underneath the car. Here I'm using a tool to remove this push pin that holds the inner fender well to the brake duct. If you don't have a special tool, you can potentially use a crowbar or use a screwdriver to release that. Here I'm using a 7mm socket to remove 2 bolts from the inner fender well area of the Corvette. The first one's in the painted area, and the second bolt is in the back. It's holding the brake duct and the inner fender liner to the body of the car. Here we're using a 7mm socket to remove 1 more bolt to help release the inner fender well of the car so it can gain access to the fuel door. And we have 1 more bolt that we're going to release here in the painted area underneath the car. Here I'm pulling down and slightly out on the inner fender liner to release it from the body of the car so we can gain access to the fuel filler door latch mechanism. Next I used a 15mm wrench to remove the nut from the fuel filler door latch mechanism. Next I reached my hand up between the fender liner and the fender of the car and pulled out the cable that contains the latch mechanism. So here's a close-up of the part that we just removed at the end of the cable. We need to disassemble this and get to the spring. First I'm going to remove this rubber boot by sliding it down the cable. Next we need to release these 2 tabs that hold the bottom of the switch together. Be careful with them. I tried to do it with my fingernails. It was not good, so I had to take a small slotted screwdriver and use it to pry gently up on the plastic to get it to clear those tabs. Be careful when doing this that you don't break off the hold down tabs. And unfortunately, right at this point, my Nikon camera decided that it no longer wanted to focus on my hands or the cable. It decided to focus on the back fender well. So to give you an idea of what it looks like, here's the end of the cable with a replacement spring. What you'll find is the spring in your cable will be disintegrated. It might be in several pieces. It will be rusted. And that's what the issue is. There's not enough spring left to push that pin out far enough so that it holds the gas door shut. I found a spring in my shed on one of these old DC cables that I had for automotive purposes. I opened it up, took out the spring. The spring was a little bit too long, so I had to cut it down and make the bottom end of it a little bit wider by kind of unwinding the spring so it could fit over the pin. Probably the ideal spring might come from a soap dispenser that you might have laying around the house. So if you have a old beaten up soap dispenser or a good one, or you don't want to make a parts run to the store, you could maybe take a look at opening up one of these and stealing the spring out of it. For the spring to work, it needs to be no wider than the space between the two arrows here. Anything bigger than that, it's not going to fit into that recessed area. So that's criteria number one. It needs to be smaller than that. The second criteria is the spring needs to be big enough to fit over the plastic end. So this cable is going to slide onto this piece of plastic, and the spring will need to slide over this plastic end between the arrows. The third factor in choosing a spring is the length of the spring. How long it needs to be, however, depends upon how strong of a spring it is. If the spring is too strong, the pin isn't going to be able to pull back when you push in the gas cap button. So if it's really strong spring, it probably needs to be shorter. If it's a really weak spring, it needs to be longer. So here I was aiming for right at the end of the cable. That seemed to be sufficient and work in my case. Here I'm pulling out on the cable and then putting the spring in. I'm pushing it in with my fingers and holding it down. Next, I'm taking the end piece and sliding it over the cable stop. Here's a close-up image of that cable stop. So the cable stop just slides right into the side of the piece of plastic, the pin that's going in and out of the gas cap door. And then next, your spring needs to slide over that cable stop area where it connected to the piece of plastic. All right, this should go in smooth. We're gonna look here. There in one spot here is a groove. It's probably hard to see in the camera, but right at the top here, there's a little groove in the back. On this part here, there's a little notch. So as best as we can, we're gonna try to line those up, and this goes in and it's in the right spot. The part should just slide right out. If it goes in tough, then it's not in the right spot. Then we need to get our hold down tabs locked. So push hard to make sure that those are there. So now I can see how this is a lot further out than what it used to be. I'm gonna make sure that those are in really tight. And then push our piece of rubber back over the top to help weather seal it. And then most of it's round with this flat part. The flat part needs to go to the top parallel with this. There's a piece of plastic in the way, so if you try to put this round part up, then it will bind and you won't be able to get this to stick through. So put this flat part up to the top. Success. So once you have it through, you'll see there's enough threads there to grab our nut. There we have our nut back on. Go ahead and find our wrench. Now I can see that switch sticks out a lot farther than it did before, so now it will grab on to the gas door. It'll stick right through there and grab on just fine. This is a view inside of the fender. You can see the tape up on the body of the car by the cable. The cable should be put up against the body of the car, and then that tape over the top of the cable that will help secure the cable. Here we're going to go ahead and start putting the car back together. So first we're going to put in the bolt on the back side of the car. Put the bolt that you removed on the underside of the car and tighten the bolt. Next I'm putting the push pin in. It goes through the inner fender well and into the brake duct. Apparently I forgot to record the mounting of the upper brake duct bolt, which is in this video right to the lower left of where I'm attaching the current bolt. So make sure to put that bolt on. Next I removed my jack stand to prepare the car for being lowered. And then I attached the wheel to the car and got the bolts started. Before lowering the car, I tightened the bolts to approximately 80 foot-pounds. Once the car was lowered, then I went back with the torque wrench and tightened them to the full 100 foot-pounds. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope you have a wonderful day and get out there and drive your C6 Corvette without the fuel filler door staying open.